Welcome to the Nonessential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Steve Gibson too.
I feel so bad for you right now. You've had some terrible things happen to you over the last 10 years, and I've never felt as bad as I do now that you're Steve Gibson.
Having a
also.
fucking Freaky Friday with somebody who has just as boring of a life as me. That's a movie with no plot.
Yeah, that would be great. Two people switch bodies, but they're basically the same anyway.
Yeah, they're coworkers.
It's just you have a different shitty job, but just slightly different, and yeah. Hey, that's my favorite t-shirt. You're like, that's my favorite. And the solution to the entire movie is you just swap shirts. You're like, well, here's your shirt back.
Never trade shirts with another man.
No, that's weird.
Yeah. Never trade shirts with a woman. Just because they'll fit
depends. Weird. Yeah, but some of those that have the frills around the collar really flatter my shoulders.
What do they flatter? Your shoulders?
Yeah.
You're one of the stockiest people I know.
Well, that's what I mean. When you're a short, stocky, old guy wearing a frilly shirt, it takes the attention away from
you look
your
like a flower that gave up and decided to just bloom before it grew.
You're just one of those flowers from an RPG that spews toxins when people get too close. I just start
a Dark Souls flower that just spits poison.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. Every week we tell each other stories. Or this week.
Not this week.
This week I'm going to just bitch about my laundry machine. So buckle up for that. 30 minutes of that. Now, before we were doing the show, you heard me grumbling, and it's I have this fucking laundry machine that it's a piece of shit anyway. Even by laundry machine standards, it takes 3 hours to dry a load. But they're also they're fucking liars. So you set it to hey, it's 12 minutes. And in laundry terms, that's 36 fucking minutes.
Yeah, I've noticed we've got a relatively new washer and dryer because when we moved in, the new house didn't have it, and our old one was from the 70s. So it's it's a good time to invest in some new appliances. But I've noticed that the dryer, especially the washing machine's not as bad, but the dryer will be yep, 3 minutes left, and an hour later it finally dings. And
my thing does it's the dryer's just broken. I think the fan that's supposed to perpetuate heat into it is broken or something. So it just doesn't get very hot. But the washing machine is fucking an ancient torture if you're in a hurry, because it's just it's constantly doing that final pissant fucking lazy spin, because it's oh, there's just a little bit more water here, just a little bit more, and it will do that for 15 minutes.
Does yours do that thing where it does it and it finally slows to a stop? You're okay, and then it starts spinning the other direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck it. No more clothes. That's my verdict.
I'm gonna I think I've bought you games on Steam twice over the 10 years that you were writing for a joystick. But the first real present I'm gonna get you will be one of those old timey washboard things, with the rollers.
I basically have to do that anyway because my fucking machine sucks so bad. There's a lot of stuff that I just have to hand wash.
If I had one of those, so what I would do is just wait till the morning that I have to get dressed and wash the one thing I want to wear that day. I would never do a load of laundry. It would be I want this shirt, I'm washing this one shirt.
I would probably keep a gun hidden inside the washboard. just so I could have that moment it's an assassin. I'm constantly thinking of ways I want to go out.
Yeah. But you want to at least get some shots off back in return.
Well, the problem is the fucking gun was soaking in water. It jammed. It's fucked.
Yeah, it'd be one of those things where they're about to shoot you, but you get to draw on them, and then you pull the trigger and a bubble comes out, bloop, bloop.
And then I would look into the barrel because nobody taught me not to do that and fucking blow my head off.
The assassin's like, I hope I still fucking get paid for this. Like,
Nah, I'm the assassin in this scenario.
I see.
You get what you pay for. That was $20.
Washboard bin.
You covered.
Can't wait to do an episode on it.
You gave me half the price of a fucking Wendy's combo.
I like that idea too. Like, they don't even
We'll
buy
kill
you
for
lunch.
food.
Yeah.
For part of food.
So we're 5 minutes in. I already don't know what we're talking about.
I don't know. I thought we were just rolling with shit.
Yeah. No.
No? Okay.
No, I'm rolling over here. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I think that's a drug term.
It is.
Cool.
Ask me how I know.
I took some of the Molly.
I took some shit I was assured was Molly once. I definitely felt a way about stuff, but I don't know if it was actually that or not.
Tic Tac, yeah.
My breath was never that fresh.
Yeah,
that was.
That's what I wanted. I kind of want to go to a rave and just hand out Flintstones vitamin. Don't tell people they're drugs because that's illegal too, even if it's not drugs. But just like if you put a Flintstone vitamin in your hand and go up to somebody like, hey, you want one? You know people would take them because they assume it's drugs. But if you get caught, they can't fucking arrest you for handing out vitamins. Be like, look, all these kids looked anemic. I was just making sure they're okay.
That was only like the one rave I've ever been to. But I can tell you the state of mind of everybody there was, well, yeah, hand me whatever the fuck and let's see what happens. So you can make everyone really healthy with Flintstone vitamins.
I'm sure anybody that knows me or listens to this show or you won't be surprised by this fact. But when I was in college, we actually went to like an industrial, like techno type club, basically a rave, but like not the, I know there's like different categories, but we went like every fucking Tuesday because that's the night that they had it. It was at one of Pittsburgh's historic music venues, but kind of a small to medium-sized one. Yeah. And it's not there anymore. They turned it into student housing. So that's the funny thing is it was a venue that was kind of known for like punk and industrial and that stuff. And then it went and turned itself into like a dorm building. But anyway, but yeah, so same deal. Like we'd go, I didn't do that stuff. We usually just got like as pissed drunk as we could.
Yeah, that happened too. Not to me, but one of my friends, he drank, like, we got like a giant bottle of Gatorade, and he was gonna just like mix some. I don't remember if it was gin or vodka into it, but the measurements were off. I don't know.
Sounds like the measurements were on.
I don't know how much they poured into it, but I do know how much he drank, which was about 3/4 of that fucking bottle in like the first few minutes.
Yeah.
And I don't think we were like a song into the rave before we were like basically getting kicked out because he was so fucking stupid drunk. And we all knew we needed to leave. They wanted us gone because he was definitely underage, and we wanted to be out of there because our friend's dying in the bathroom. Yeah, and we were.
Well, yeah.
So
yeah, see, that's the fun part is back at this time when we would go to this club, most of us weren't 21 yet. A couple of us were, so we couldn't drink there. Or at least not their stuff. I think we'd sometimes like sneak a flask in and stuff. Yeah. But mostly what we do is we just drink as much as we could beforehand. Mm-hmm. The problem was this club was a 45-minute bus ride from our apartments. So you had to get really fucking drunk and then survive a 45-minute bus ride without pissing yourself. And there was 2 or 3 times we'd get off the bus and you couldn't even make it.
It was another dick pissing on the bus.
It was true. We never made it to that point, but we did multiple times piss in the alley immediately outside the bus stop because the venue was on the like 5th floor, and then you had to wait like to get in through the door. So it's like fuck that. We're not, whatever. Yeah. It's amazing. I've never been arrested.
One of my friends is like he was notoriously bad about timing his public urination. Like, literally every time he tried to piss in an alley, and one time we were at a bus station, and he didn't even go up against a wall. He just turned around like an animal and just started pissing on the sidewalk behind us.
Was he drunk, or does he just not care?
He just didn't give a shit. And every time a cop or a security guard pulled up right to get a full fucking view, and he would often use me or one of my other friends' names to... Oh, cool. Yeah, it's like, that's awesome. Now they think some dude...
You're probably on... I know here they can put you on the sex offenders registry for that, because they'll call it, like...
He had the decency not to use, like, he didn't go Ben Matlock, but he would say, oh, I'm, Jeff Matlock. His name's not Jeff, I'm changing it, but... Yeah. It's the same idea as, like... If, I don't even want my last name in there.
Yeah.
But luckily
There's
I have
so
a
many
common
last names
name
that you can throw out there. Like, why use somebody you actually know? Like,
dude, or use someone you hate. Like,
well, right.
Like, I was your friend at the time, dude. Why were you doing that to me?
My name is Mr. Bergstrom.
And the thing was, he wasn't even, like, smooth about it. He would, like, turn... he'd be like, I'm... and then, like, look at me, and, like, the light bulb would go off, but it would kind of flicker for, like, 10 minutes, and then light up. So, memory lane.
Yeah.
It's always fun. I'm old now, so I get to be nostalgic for a time where I really didn't give a shit.
Which honestly wasn't that different from this time.
Now I give a shit because if you live that way, you feel like fucking death in the morning. That's my only
and
gripe.
you actually like do real jail time and have actual consequences.
I mean, what those are.
I guess
mostly the hangover.
That just gives you credit. Yeah, the hangover is a big one.
Kids, like you could just bounce off shit,
Yes. I'm curious how many times like we did stuff the next day still legally drunk because like you just didn't feel like it at that age. You could drink all fucking night as long as I got like a half hour of sleep in there at some point. You wake up like you're Superman.
Yeah.
Like, let's fucking do this.
Right. Anyway, let's start the show because, that's 12 minutes of people being like, everyone has those stories.
I know, you're not special. In fact, those are rather tame compared to the rest of us, you dicks.
It's just a new approach. We're trying to be the relatable show.
Yeah. Welcome to the Blue Collar Hour.
In my day, we got trophies for winning.
Well, I didn't because we never won, but I know what you're saying.
If you wanted a trophy, you had to be a redneck. Fuck Jeff Foxworthy. Fucking. That's
him and that stupid mustache.
He has that new special and it has that bit about there that's just so like Netflix just like tweeted the clip and I was like, well, he hasn't done shit in 20 years. And then he comes back and being like, why are we handing out participation awards? It's like they did it when you were a kid too, dude. The only time that wasn't a thing was in World War II.
I don't know. The Nazis got awards.
Yeah, they made them, though. They made them for themselves.
Yeah.
It's like, I got a skull trophy on my hat.
But I think what's more offensive about that joke to me is that was the joke 15 years ago. So if you come out with a new special and lead with, like, that's the clip that people want to show.
Yeah.
It's
pretty weak. But to me, like, my big thing is, like, if you're going to live that life and shit on everybody for, like, trying to, like, sports for kids, like, activities should be empowering for them.
No, they shouldn't. They should be about setting your parents up for life.
The kids who are drawn to competition will be drawn to competition anyway. Like, this should be about, like, exploring interests and keeping them active and shit. If it's really about proving who's the best, then these fucking idiots can take their kids and put them up against LeBron James. Because if we're going to decide the best... Your kid got fucking
stumped,
If we're going to decide the best, don't fuck around. Like, you're going to the tippy top.
Anyway,
Anyway, I want my son to get posterized by LeBron James.
So, yeah, we do show the stories each week, right?
Yeah. So what's the story? What's the thing? What's the big thing of the week?
That's the thing. We've been busy at work, and I was like, I don't know if I can put a topic together. It's like, maybe I'll do a creepypasta. And then I thought, you know what, Steve, you're a pretty funny guy. Not traditionally funny, like most other people don't think I am.
So you're doing a 5-minute stand-up set?
Yeah, I thought...
I'm going to heckle the fuck out of you.
I couldn't... not 5 minutes. If I was going to go in, I went all in. I've got about an hour and a half worth of material here that I thought I would try out. In the perfect venue, because this is basically like stand-up to the audience of one, and that one person hates you. So it should go really well.
I'm going to tell you right off the bat, this is a horrible idea.
Yeah, good, because it's not my actual thing. Okay. I didn't actually do that.
All right.
As much as I've thought about and would love to try out some comedy at some point, I do imagine
that I could wrap my head around you just writing down fucking dad jokes while you're ignoring me every week.
and those bomb enough, but then when I'm doing them in a venue where I know the only thing you would have to do is to sit there and heckle, because what else are you going to do? Just sit there and be like, yeah.
If I did it to Richard Matheson last week, I'll do it to you too.
Okay, so I did not do a stand-up routine.
Okay.
All right, so the Kee Bird was built at Boeing's plant in Wichita, Kansas in 1945. The Block 95 B-29 Superfortress was one of the last to be built at the plant. That was kind of a joke, because I wanted to start this. This is a story about a plane, but I had to start it like every other fucking notes that I do, where it's like, so-and-so was born. Right.
When two planes love each other very much.
The plane would spend a year in storage at an airstrip in Tucson, Arizona, which I don't know why I included that other than it was in the article. A year later, it was one of 19 bombers assigned to the 46th Reconnaissance Squadron, and was one of only 6 to be outfitted with an array of photographic equipment. So in the early days of the Cold War, information on the Russian military operations and assets and geography and maps and all that good stuff was a priority for the United States. But unfortunately, the satellite technology wasn't yet a viable option, because they didn't have any. And they didn't have any high altitude spy planes either. It's hard to be stealthy in 1945 airplanes, because they're giant, they're loud, and they fly low. So, I mean, you could try that, paint it like a bird and be like, don't mind us. But basically, the U.S. had no real way to get real good information on the interior of Russia without being super fucking obvious about it and getting shot down. So instead, the U.S. relied on long-range planes equipped with arrays of photo equipment to fly along the country's borders, attempting to gather information and create maps and blah, blah, blah.
I'm just imagining a periscope within a periscope with just extending all the way from the border into
it doesn't actually magnify all that well. You have to almost touch what you're looking at with
you're just being hit by a long string of toilet paper tubes.
Yeah, it's very Seussian, where I guess Tim Burton, because it would just bend at all weird angles and stuff too as it went. So apparently, once a B-29 or B whatever is fitted with photography equipment, it becomes designated as an F-13, where the F stands for photography. So that's the United States education system for you. And I like to think that there's some military nerd listening to this that'll angrily tweet in, they use F because P stands for this or that, and whatever. It's just funny to me that they're it becomes an F for photography.
Yeah, we're really bad at our acronyms and shit.
As Cold War tensions continued to escalate, Strategic Air Command began exploring the possibility of attacking Russian targets via routes over the North Pole. Mapping and exploring these routes was part of a greater effort known as Project Nanook, which was funny because I never really thought about that. This base that these operations were out of. There's a couple, but the ones that this story specifically was out of is in Alaska. And, like, it's very obvious that, like, you know, when you think, okay, we need to fly to Russia, you think, okay, we'll fly west because Russia's right fucking there. You know, they almost touch. But that's also not very sneaky. And your other option, given the fact that it's a round globe, is to kind of fly up through the North Pole and kind of over. And I would, as obvious as that is, I'm like, I don't know if I would think of that. Like, I always think of travel as east-west. But anyway, so that's what the Kee Bird was doing. The Kee Bird's missions were designed to, and I'm going to copy this like directly from Wikipedia because it's just kind of a long, boring list of what their mission was.
Does this plane like get a song like "I'm as key as a bird now"?
I think so. I think that's where Freebird came from.
They
like tried.
off.
It was originally Kee Bird, and then the U.S. Air Force is like, "You hippies can't use that name."
Yeah.
And it's like, fine. And by the way, I don't really. It's not important either way, but it's Kee. It's Kee. I think it's an actual type of bird. But I realized, like, halfway through writing the notes, it's like, it's going to sound like key
lime.
Door key. Yeah. Key lime I like better. It's a delicious airplane. Little sour, but mostly sweet.
The key lime comes from key lime birds.
And the best part about a key lime airplane is if it crashes in the ocean, it floats. And it makes it delicious.
If it crashes, it becomes a pie.
Sort of Sprite. All right. So this plane was used to develop accurate polar navigation, survey and map the Arctic, perform comprehensive weather studies, test its men and equipment in Arctic conditions,
and
train in polar
bomb.
navigation and operations, and fly long-range photographic intelligence flights, blah, 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 blah. So basically, they were just trying to, like, figure out how to, like, military in the Arctic, which had to be fun for anybody assigned to this plane.
It's kind of like how we are now trying to find a way to bring war into space.
Right. It's actually exactly like that. That's a good analogy.
Yeah, they're like,
well,
oh,
we
man,
know this is going to be terrible
there.
and dangerous, and there's nothing to do, but let's send a bunch of soldiers out there to work. And then soldiers are like, well, shit.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. Give my life to the North Pole.
You sign up because you're like, there's a lot of air bases in Hawaii, right? And they're like, yeah. You're going to Alaska. Fuck. So on February 20th, 1947, the Kee Bird departed from Ladd Field on its 7th mission. Like all of its missions, this flight was classified top secret. The goal of this no longer secret mission was to fly to the geographic North Pole, then return back to Ladd Field. So that's literally like the point in all this that they're at. They're like, let's just like, it's strategically important for us to just fly to the North Pole and back to see if it works. Like, I don't think to see if it works per se, but they like, I guess they're mapping it, trying to find, you know, you got to learn the jet streams and the terrain and that stuff. But it just seems funny that like this top secret mission nobody can know about is to fly to the North Pole and back.
Just find Santa.
It sounds like it's kind of like the tutorial mission if you just bought a flight simulator. Like,
go, yeah, here's B, you're at A, here's B, go to B, you know?
And then back to A and try to land. Yeah. Good luck.
Landing's the hardest part.
The mission was led by Lieutenant Vern Arnett, and he had a crew of 11 men. The plane had been outfitted with extra fuel tanks, which would provide an estimated 26 hours of flight time. The mission itself was estimated to take between 12 and 20 hours to complete, which seems like a hell of a window to me for the military on a relatively straightforward mission to fly to point B and back.
And they gave them 26?
Yeah, 26 hours worth of fuel.
For
but
a trip that could go to 20.
Yeah.
That seems
but
very
it could be
unnecessarily risky for a test flight.
But it seems... But on the short side of it, they said it could only be 12 hours, but it might be 20. We don't know.
But knowing what we know about fucking military shit, it's like, if you tell me it could be 20, I'm going to be like, all right, it's going to be 50 hours at least. Because something's going to break.
So despite not knowing if it would take 12 hours or 20 hours, the Kee Bird was estimated to arrive back at Ladd Field at 10 the following morning. And again, I don't know how the fuck you know what time they're supposed to get back when you don't know if it's going to take 12 hours or 20 hours. Like, that's It's like, maybe they're like, we just don't know what time this plane actually left. Like, we forgot to mark it down on the books.
Huh.
We know exactly when it'll be back, but we don't know how long it'll take, okay?
It can take you 12 hours or 20 hours, but you have to be back by 5.
You know, they maybe were having the same problem that I have throughout these notes, in that and that I have in real life. Like, they're flying across like weird different time zones. They're like, we don't fucking know how this conversion works. Maybe it was 12 hours. Maybe it was 20.
Well, you said they were going north, right?
Yeah.
So the time zones change a lot up there, right? Wouldn't they?
Well, right, because
so you'd be at the very top of the fucking world. You're at no time.
Right, if you go slightly past the North Pole, you're on literally the other side of the Earth time.
You are
12 hours ahead.
You are beyond time, which is exactly 12 to 20 hours.
And I like to think that people in 1945, like, they really didn't. They thought you were physically time traveling when that happened.
You kind of are.
That's why they were.
Time's a man-made construct. So
that's true. So all missions were flown under radio silence for security, and because, of course, they were a spy operation. So when the Kee Bird left and nobody heard from it, that was normal. And it continued to be normal until about 7:46 the following morning, when a Civil Aeronautics Authority radio tower picked up a transmission from the crew. So basically, like a regular civilian air tower.
It's gone bad.
I can't tell what fucking time it is. We're on course. I'm supposed to call my wife at 8, and if I don't get this right, I'm in big trouble.
Sarge, you piece of...
So the call that the civil radio tower picked up was from the crew, and it indicated that the sun was too low and it had become impossible
It's
to navigate.
too low, we crashed it.
I would think we clipped a wing.
Something's real
Call
bad.
us Icarus.
The sun hangs out at the North Pole. Who would have thought?
It's funny because, like, when I read that, it's like, the sun's too low, we can't navigate. And I was like, that sounds stupid. And it's like, yeah, but in 1945, a lot of the flight navigation still relied almost 100% on
instinct.
Just you look at, well, yeah, I think we're going this way. Yeah, but just like visual navigation. So I guess, and my guess too, but I would think if you could even tell, they were probably using the sun itself as like a waypoint, and then once it goes beyond the horizon, then it's like, well, that's the other thing is, you know, for me, if I'm like driving or hiking somewhere, just knowing like the general whereabouts of the sun is usually kind of enough to get me where I'm going.
Yeah.
When you're flying like hundreds of miles, if you're off by like 2 degrees, you're off by a big distance when you get back. So that, I don't know.
Strap a pole to the front of the plane, use the sundial.
But it seems a little funny to me that this mission that was 100% just to map a navigation route to the North Pole and back was that reliant. Like, they didn't foresee, like, oh, well, now we can't see the sun, we're fucked.
Yeah.
Like, so all the Russians had to do was wait for cloudy days, and the U.S. was just unable to spy.
Sounds right.
Yeah. 2 minutes after that call, the Lieutenant Arnett himself reported that they had encountered a severe storm at 24,000 feet, which I liked because last week you had the Terra at 20,000 feet, and now I have the severe storm at 24,000 feet. So it's like my story's just trying to one-up you.
I didn't write it. So to be fair.
Well, and honestly, adding 4,000 feet in a regular thing like a storm doesn't make it scarier to me than
I'm on the ground.
terror. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there was the Nightmare at 20,000.
Or the Nightmare, yeah.
How's that make you feel? Now you know it's a nightmare.
Well, that's even, yeah. Sorry, Lieutenant Arnett, you got beat by Math Man, or whatever it is.
A nightmare is worth 20 more thousand feet. It's basically a 40,000 feet shit your pants.
So they didn't know where they are. They encountered a storm. They said that they were over land. They could see that they were over some land, but they had no idea where they were. So it was clear that the crew was lost and likely in trouble. But fortunately, government bureaucracy and red tape hadn't been invented yet, or at least it hadn't been exported to Alaska yet. So they actually launched the search and rescue operation like immediately, as soon as they were like, yeah, this crew, they're lost.
Go get them, Action Moose.
Let's go get them. Because we've done so many stories, like even modern day stories, where it'd be like, oh, they don't know where they're at, but they haven't been missing 48 hours yet, so our hands are tied.
Well, especially back in the day, it was like you expected people to be gone like 3 years, so you wouldn't look for them until 5.
Yeah, you're right. Like they might have got held up,
and that was only if you really liked them.
That's true. I'm curious how many distraught widows went to the Royal Navy and were like, my husband's ship hasn't come back, and they're like, oh no, that's awful. We'll look into that right away.
Ay, Dios mío.
Didn't he have the good parking spot? Yeah, there's nothing we could do, ma'am. Anyway, so they launched the search and rescue right away. Around 9:55 that morning, another transmission was received from the Kee Bird indicating that they only had 4 minutes of fuel remaining, and they'd be making a crash landing on land or ice. So basically, they could see solid ground below them. They knew that they were going to have to go down, so they were telling them that, hey, we're going to put this bird on the ground. But to your earlier point, they were supposed to get back to base at 10 o'clock that morning, and they were supposed to have plenty of fuel. And here it is, 5 minutes to 10, and they've got 4 minutes of fuel left. So that tells me, had the flight gone like it was supposed to, they still would have fucking been out of fuel, like you said.
Yeah.
Or at least damn near.
That shit happens a lot in our stories, where it's like, just basic prep. Like, whatever you think it should be, double the supplies. Because you're trying something new.
Or you modify the mission, because with airplanes, it's not like you can just we'll put double the amount of fuel. You've only got so much space and weight that you can deal with.
Well, do you need a fucking giant crew? Make that idiot Tony get off.
And we could use another Tony's worth of fuel. Tony, get off.
I mean, once the fucking thing's in the air, how many jobs are there really on the plane? That's just like the co-pilot being lazy.
Well, here's the thing, too. All they're doing is flying back and forth and, visibly, looking at the ground and taking pictures of the ground. Mm-hmm. So, you said, 2 people need to be working. The rest are just there to, play cards or something.
Yeah. Hey, bring me a coffee. Hey, go fuck yourself.
Part of our mission is to see if we can carry exactly 11 men to the North Pole and back. Why? Because that's the amount we need to know.
Because that's enough to outnumber Santa and his elves.
Russia doesn't have a word for the number 11, so that means we're guaranteed to at least have one more man.
They'll think they're seeing double and run away.
So anyway, everybody knew that the plane was going down, but at least controlled, landing, or at least it's supposed to be. And based on the mission and the timing of the reports, the search efforts initially focused on the northern coast of Alaska, which would make perfect sense. So fortunately for Lieutenant Arnett and his crew, they survived the emergency landing. Unfortunately for them, they had landed on a frozen lake in Greenland.
I was going to say, they didn't go the right way, did they?
They did not. So if you're not familiar with geography, and I'll admit it's not one of my stronger areas, I want to point out that the north coast of Alaska is, in Alaska.
Oh.
And Greenland, on the other hand, is an Alaska-sized landmass that's halfway between Canada and fucking Norway.
Yeah.
So,
you didn't even get the right ocean
it's
side.
It's not even... No!
Wow. They're navigators? You had 11 people there, and nobody fucking knew what Alaska was?
Right.
Jesus Christ.
So what I'm saying is they were more than a little off target.
Yeah.
And I'm
We've been
including
spying on Finland this entire time, thinking it's Russia.
I would love that. I mean, I'm over Sweden. I'm I don't see any weapons of mass destruction, but they've got some delightful gummy fish candy.
Did you know Russians love fishing? What the fuck?
I thought Russia was bigger on the map, but it's really long and skinny. That's weird. Yeah. So this next part's also copied directly from the article. Not because I can follow it, but because I think it does an excellent job conveying how lost the crew were. So a later debriefing of the crew indicated that the aircraft had reached the North Pole. Then it made a 70-degree turn southwest, and then a 120 turn to the southwest. Then the pilot became disoriented over the polar ice pack, just north of 85 degrees north. Right. So he then began to fly south, and then east for some reason, and then turning west over northern Greenland, where they made the emergency landing.
Okay.
Like, yeah, so it sounds like they were just like, we hit the North Pole, which way do we turn? Like, fuck, there's not a corner to it, it's just a dot. It could be anywhere.
I don't know, over there it looks cold.
And then, once they made one turn, I like that he didn't stick with it. He's just like, okay, well, maybe this way? Maybe that way? I don't fucking know.
Shit.
So, I'm not going to bore you further than I already have with the list of all the planes involved in the search, because who cares? But within the first 24 hours or so...
They lost 5
there
more
was a plane. I could have sworn because I had come across a story a while ago. I think I saw it on a TV show, honestly. I think they did have another 1 or 2 planes go down in the search for this plane, but I didn't find it in the articles that I was using.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Once a plane fucks up Alaska for Greenland.
Well, and then there was they're like, this one plane couldn't tell where the fuck it was going. Let's launch like 19 more planes that have the identical like crews and equipment.
Imagine you're Russia during all this, you're monitoring it, and you see all these fucking American planes like seemingly all like in mass movement. And you're just like,
it goes one or two ways, because you see like the random things. You see one land in a fucking lake in Greenland, and you're either like, these idiots have no idea what they're doing, or what I prefer is I'm picturing a bunch of sweaty Russian generals like, what the fuck are they doing?
Hands on the fucking nuclear button.
Yeah, we don't know where this is going, but it doesn't look good.
They're planning something in Greenland. My God. And that's why I'm afraid of nuclear war, because it'll never happen for a good reason.
No, and there's a well-known story of like us being about 10 seconds away from an inadvertent nuclear war, but during the Cold War, and I'm sure there's other stories of very similar things. Yeah. You're right. If we get into 10 nuclear war, we won't, because we'd die in one. But say out of 10 nuclear wars that humanity could get in, 9 of them would be over stupid mistakes and misunderstandings.
Yeah, totally. Like just somebody not hitting Control-Alt-Delete on their fucking radar, and
Bill set the coffee cup down on the launch button, something like that. Like
a fly lands on their computer screen, they think it's a bomb.
Right. So there was a whole bunch of airplanes looking for him within 24 hours.
Did they find him?
One that was searching the McKenzie Bay area of northern Canada made radio contact with the downed plane, because apparently that was close enough to Greenland. After some plotting and triangulation and whatever, they determined that the Kee Bird was, in fact, in Greenland. So around 8 a.m.
They stopped worrying.
Yeah, they're like, okay, we know where it's at. Fuck those guys. We're not going to get them. We just wanted to make sure the Russians didn't get them.
Bring back the Kee Bird.
Bring back the Kee Bird and 7 of your men. You decide which.
Bring back the Kee Bird and be home by 10.
So around 8 o'clock in the morning the next day, so almost exactly 24 hours after the crash, visual contact was made with the plane by one of the other searching planes. Going to go ahead and mention that at the time, and probably all future times I list, might not be accurate in this article, because like I said in the beginning, it starts to go back and forth. Like in some spots, they'd be like, oh, at 8 o'clock, basically crash site time. And then they're like, and then the general back at the airfield at 11:30 Alaska time. It's like, I don't know the time zone that Green Zone's in. I don't know the difference between there and Alaska. And I don't particularly care what time this stuff happened. So any times you hear from this point out are just there for flavor. Anyway. The first plane to make visual contact was able to drop supplies. The plane also had
water balloons.
Yeah, it's like, haha, take this, fuckers. We got you. So this part was confusing to me, because they found a plane within a day. The plane that went down was already provisioned with like 2 weeks worth of supplies in case the plane goes down. Multiple other planes came by and dropped supplies for them. But they ended up being rescued in like 2 or 3 days, so spoiler alert there. So it's like the military was like, we really fucking care about these people, which is great. They should.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, every supply crate you can find in our arsenal, just launch it at them. And then, oh, maybe we should pick them up. So I imagine there was like a lot of supplies that they didn't fucking need.
Yeah.
Like, oh well.
But I'm keeping them.
Yeah.
Once I get supplies, I don't let them go. These go into my bomb shelter.
So in the meantime, the crew was ordered to destroy their radar, the IFF, which is Identification Friend or Foe Transponder. Basically, I think it's like a little device in the plane that tells the other planes when you're in the sky, like, hey, is this one of ours or one of theirs? Which is probably not a bad idea to have. Despite that, we've all seen many stories of ourselves, like,
about to bomb
our armies
ourselves.
shooting their... Yeah. And they were also just ordered to destroy the LORAN system. As an aside, LORAN is the long-range navigation equipment, which I'm guessing the crew was more than happy to take a few hatchets to, because it clearly didn't fucking work. Like,
we destroyed that, like, the first fucking hour.
Right. Like, fuck you, LORAN. Like, maybe they didn't order them to destroy that, but they just added that, it's a revisionist
Actually,
history.
we can reuse that, like, the hell you can.
Not at any flight I'm ever on. Like, at that point, because again, like I said, I was under the impression between the sun thing and everything else, I was like, yeah, navigation was still, like, by sight. And it's like, oh, yeah, they're long-range radio navigation systems. Like, oh, that worked wonderfully. Whatever. And I get it, like, it's not foolproof, but you'd think you could get the right fucking continent, at least.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah.
I bet,
like I said, they were probably ecstatic to be told to bust that thing.
Yeah, I don't know if the technology is an innocent bystander, because that seems like such a panic move to me. I turned left, I turned right, Greenland.
That's true. They forgot they had it on board. Yeah. So they're sitting there, like, waiting to be rescued. And they're like, oh, yeah, by the way, guys on the ground where you're waiting for us, can you destroy that navigation equipment? And they're like, the navigation?
Well, this is what happens when your pilot looks directly at the sun and then complains it's too low.
So the crew was eventually picked up. The plane was left behind. Of the 11 men, there were no major injuries or, and I quote, frozen things. So I don't know if they mean things like just in general body parts or if they mean, hey, we don't have any frozen penises over here. Good news. Not like that last rescue we did.
It's fucking White Walkers from Game of Thrones. There's frozen things out there.
A few of them suffered from mild exposure and shock. Upon return home, both the rescued crew of the Kee Bird and the crew of the rescue plane were given steak dinners. I only include this because that's like the most like corporate office level bullshit I've ever heard. Mm-hmm. Like, congratulations on crashing in the middle of snow hell and not dying. Here's a pizza party.
Yeah, pizza. Is it from a good place?
We know you had a hard day. But... We know you had a hard couple days out there, guys, so we bought you some steaks. We expect you to be back in at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Dismissed.
Grab a slice and keep your fucking mouth shut about what you did.
Like, you got any whiskey to go with the steak? Fuck no. You'll eat your plain steak, no sides.
We will be taking those extra supplies out of your paycheck.
So all of that history is kind of like a little interesting, but nothing about it really is our like typical non-essential podcast material. Don't fear. I've saved that part for last. While I may be overselling this a little, or maybe not, I don't know. The ending, if nothing else, if you don't find the ending like a good non-essential podcast ending, it will prove how much of an asshole I am, which you all already know. Because I find this part extremely entertaining. So, nearly 50 years after the crash, the plane was still sitting on that frozen lake in the middle of nowhere in Greenland, and it was largely intact. Many believed it could be brought back to flying condition. The Air Force had surrendered claims to the craft, meaning it was basically just sitting there up for grabs to whoever wanted to like spend the time and effort to go.
It's a fixer-upper, but...
Yeah. You know,
don't fly north of it.
the market for used crashed World War II planes was down for 50 years.
You gotta just jiggle the shift there and avoid the North Pole. It doesn't like cold weather.
From the sounds of it, that's what's funny too, is because they came in to rescue him. It sounds like all they needed was gas. It's like, just drop us off some gas. We only ran out of gas.
Well, that's where that's to your point. They probably destroyed it already because they're this piece of shit.
And of course, I'm not that stupid. I know, given like the plane that rescued him was a completely different kind of plane. Their plane may not have been physically able to take off from those conditions, but although that's not true because that's where I'm going with this. So in 1994, a group of airplane restorers formed Kee Bird LLC and began an operation to repair and recover the craft. That year, they had 4 rebuilt engines flown out to the site, along with various other parts and tools and equipment. And basically, all summer, they worked on restoring the plane. And they got the engines up and running. They got new tires on, new air control panels. Basically, everything they had was just about ready to fly. The plan was to fly it off the lake and take it to a nearby airfield where, full repairs could be done. They just wanted to get it in the air and then get it somewhere where they could actually restore the plane. Unfortunately, before they could do that, the winter snow season moved in, and then their lead engineer fell ill, and he would die 2 weeks later from complications of blood clots.
It's a death plane.
Death plane, yeah. Now, I think that had nothing to do with much of anything other than it tends to set your operations back when a key coworker, well, when any coworker dies, but especially the lead engineer. Mm. So the operations were paused for the winter, but the team returned in May of 1995 and completed the final preparations.
It would be pretty sad if you died and they didn't miss a beat.
They got put them in the cargo hold.
I've worked with people like that though. And it's like, man, if you were gone, I'd actually do better.
I'd at least prefer the body to be out of there though. Although he died in the hospital in Canada, so it wasn't like they just left him out there in Greenland.
I would attach him to the front of the plane as decoration.
Yeah.
Name it after him.
Why not? He'd probably want it that way.
Yeah.
So they came back out in 95 and finished things up. The engines fired up, and the Kee Bird was ready for its long-awaited rescue. So everybody goes out there, the engine's fired up, the plane starts moving, rolling onto the makeshift runway, everybody's celebrating. But unfortunately, while taxiing, the jury-rigged fuel tank, which fed the auxiliary power unit, sprung a leak, and the plane caught fire. It caught a lot of fire. Luckily, the 3 members of the crew that were in the plane were able to get out, so one of them did suffer from some smoke inhalation.
Unfortunately, the 5 members outside the crew went in.
It went in, yeah. So they were all ultimately okay, fortunately. Unfortunately for them, though, the plane burned like a fucking book of matchsticks. It was spectacular. And I can say that because you can see it for yourself. Because they were filming a documentary on this plane rescue. In fact, there's a PBS Nova episode about it. And I think that's where I probably initially saw the story. And it was hilarious. I mean, it shouldn't be. And I have nothing against these restorers. And it was a really dangerous fire that could have been a lot more tragic and killed people, but it didn't.
Look, that's the game you're playing.
But watching this film as this team of people that had to fucking haul stuff for a year out into the wilderness of Greenland, which is basically just an Arctic island. It's not a nice place to have to do work. And it's not easy to get stuff out there either. That had to be expensive and time consuming.
Well, I guess that's the only thing that I'm good. I'm glad someone with the money wasted it.
Yeah, not well, I don't care if the government wasted it because they already wasted anyway. But yeah, that's the part of it. It's that Schadenfreude that but in this case, it's that you have that feeling, but for no reason. It's not like you should be wishing ill on the operation of the people.
I'm not wishing ill on them, but I feel like that's the gamble you take when you are trying to restore a plane that already proved that it failed.
Right. Well, in fairness, the plane didn't fail. The stupid crew failed.
We don't know that. We don't know if that fucking
that's true.
Navigation system or them. I'm willing to bet it was probably both.
Yeah.
It was their fault, probably. They landed in Greenland, but it was also probably the plane's fault that they didn't know where to go once they got to the north, you know?
Right. But it's great if you like, and I'm sure you can find videos of it if you probably look up Kee Bird fire or whatever.
Also, you're telling me if one of those fuckers flicked a cigarette wrong, this thing would just fucking light up like 4th of July? Like, that's a poorly made plane.
Well, but again, that was because they had to like jury rig. They just like, it sounds like they basically duct taped on an auxiliary gas tank and it came loose. Like, it wasn't the original design. This was part of their like
the very material that plane is made out of, by the nature of the job they want it to do, should be somewhat repellent.
Well, that's true, because like
instead this thing is just like, I embrace the fire. It's like a fucking Dark Souls enemy,
right? And it like I say, it's very like, it's kind of miraculous that the people in the plane got out of the plane, from what I remember of watching the fire. And it's a big fire, and it's quick fire. But that's what's so damn funny to me, because you're watching this video, and it was filmed from multiple angles because it was multiple documentaries, but like a big PBS one going on and all sorts of stuff. And you see this crew that's worked their asses off for a year, and you see the plane fire up, and they're like cheering, and it starts taxiing, and they're so excited. And then there's a giant fucking fireball, and you can just see them like deflate, like in real time, like this. Like, it's the most, and it shouldn't be funny, but maybe it's because I've been playing Elden Ring for the last few weeks, because it's the exact thing that Elden Ring does to you over and over and over again, where you think you're on the verge of like victory, and then it's like, nope.
I mean, comedy is just tragedy remembered. So
right.
It's like,
and I'm remembering this hilarious tragedy.
Like, if you can't like, if you're those guys and you're fucking bitter forever, I get it. But if you're outside of it, if you cannot see the comedic timing of them wasting months of their lives only for this thing to light up like a fucking bonfire, I can't help you. Like, that's just, you couldn't write a movie that perfectly funny.
Especially when you look at the fact that this plane made a relatively good crash landing on a fucking lake in Greenland that happened to be like frozen enough that they didn't just plummet through it.
Yeah.
And then it sat on this lake for 50 fucking years,
just waiting for them survived. To come along.
And they come along with it. We're here to save this beautiful airplane, and they burn it to the fucking ground.
Yeah. Stop playing God. Everything about that plane was decided years ago.
Right, like it was where it was meant to be. It was a beautiful, like, memorial, to
failure,
lack of navigational ability. Yeah, I don't really know what it was actually a memorial to, because it really wasn't even like a great tale of survival. Because they were only there for like 2 days.
I think
3
that's
days.
why I'm okay laughing at it, and why I'm okay. Like, to me, it's almost kind of a beautiful story, because it's like, of course it ends this way. Because that's all this plane has done is fail. It is a monument to human failure and the universal concept of it. Like, we can all relate to that, where you fucking give something your all and it fucking blows up in your face. Literally.
Yeah, that's the thing, is at the time it was kind of like one of the pinnacle. I don't know, because I'm not an aviation historian, but it was, we're running top secret Air Force, missions during the beginning of the Cold War. It had to be like one of their top, it was built to be this weapon of, espionage and war. And it fails that. And then it fails even more spectacularly as a restoration.
When it tries to be a plane at all.
Right.
Like, it's really like the best. Like, there's only a few certainties in life, and one of them is like shit is going to fail and break on you. And it's like, and this is kind of the best case of that, honestly, because it's like nobody died, but we all feel like shit about what happens. Well, so that's very funny to me.
Fairness, the lead engineer died, but it had nothing to do with the plane. As far as I know, I don't think it was like exposure to the cold that caused it. I think it was natural health things. But yeah, it wasn't our typical tragedy where it's like, it'd be like one thing if they're like, oh, the plane took off and then crashed into a village, killing 37 people.
Right.
It didn't do that. It could have if they had got it off the ground. So anyway, the plane burnt to a crisp, and because it did so in the middle of the lake, it was assumed that eventually during the warmer months it would break through the ice and sink. Fear not, hasn't yet. It's still sitting there as now it's this burned out memorial to this failed airplane, and I think that's even cooler. You can see there's
ruins.
There's a NASA satellite image of the area, and you can see just the burnt wings sticking out of the snow and some other. There's really not a lot left of this airplane. It burned pretty damn good. But it makes it that much more poetic of this thing in the landscape now, because before it was just you came across a plane that somebody was just I'm going to park it here and then forget about it. Now it's I don't know, the burnt skeleton of this airplane. And to me, that's cooler. If I'm hiking in the middle of nowhere and I come across that,
then I'll know
way
I'm
more
fucked.
Interesting. Yeah. Because somehow I took the wrong turn in Lancaster, Ohio, and ended up in Greenland.
Yeah.
How the fuck did I do that?
That'll be a pretty scary moment when it's wow, I shouldn't have given him shit. Turns out it's very easy to wind up in Greenland.
Well, it's like they say, all roads lead to Greenland. I think that's a saying.
All dogs go to Greenland.
Well, fuck, then I'd want to be in Greenland. If there's no people and a lot of dogs, except for they'd eat the crap out of you. They'd just tear you to pieces.
There'd be no rules.
Yeah, and they'd be pretty feral because there's not a lot of other food.
They'd be like, woof, woof, and that means, we're in charge. You're the dog. You go lay down. Alrighty.
I'm yawning at my own story now, so it must have been a good one.
It must be bedtime. All right.
Yeah, I might have been better off to do an hour and a half of comedy, so maybe I'll try that next time it's my turn. Be like, hey, did you hear about the lemon that wanted to go ice skating? I don't know.
I would be mutually excited and also prepared for the fact that it would be the last episode. Because you will never talk to me again if I have to heckle your stand-up set.
That's the funny thing, because I think it would be really cool to have that ability to stand up and just make crowds laugh, because I do think that's one of it's just making other people laugh. Obviously, I like to be stupid and try to make jokes. I would not make it as a stand-up because my delivery and sense of humor does not translate well to that format. And by that, I mean I'm not funny. And I have in no way, shape, or form the mental makeup to deal with hecklers.
Yeah, but I think that's... I've sometimes thought about it. And I think I could do it, but I don't have that confrontational side in me. So it's if somebody starts just talking shit, I'll just kind of try to ignore them. And it'll be the worst, most uncomfortable 5 minutes of everyone's life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because hecklers aren't funny.
No.
So they're not getting anything out of it, but you're not being able to do your shit. So...
And then everybody can see that you can't deal with it. And then it's well, how funny can this guy be if he can't even deal with this asshole that's being a dick?
Yeah, it's it's two different skill sets.
It is.
I can be very funny, but I'm also a pussy, so...
Right. I don't know.
I
imagine I would come up with some really, really, grade school comeback, and when that doesn't work, I would just continue the rest of my set, but with you could hear my voice cracking and see the tears welling up in my eyes.
You fuck off. I don't fuck with you at your job.
Have you ever noticed how people are always going into stores?
Have you noticed how people are going into stores and fucking picking on me? Have you noticed that? Anyway, that's the show this week. Kind of tune in next week while I get my stand-up career kicking off and crash landing in Greenland.
That's what we'll do. We'll do a instead of a rap battle, we'll do a stand-up battle that nobody finds funny.
They have those, comedy duels.
Yeah, and I've seen, and they could be hilarious if both people are hilarious. If one of those two people is me, it won't go well.
Anyway, yeah, we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Ciao.
It's amazing that after 170 some episodes, I still choke on the exit. I'm still recording, by the way, so this is my exit.